Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training's podcast series entitled Lived Experiences with Traumatic Brain Injury. I'm your host, Melaney Grenz, and my guest today is Super Bowl champion and National Football League tight end, Ben Utecht. In 2016, Ben wrote a book entitled Counting the Days While My Mind Slips Away. In this book, Ben describes his love of the game of football, his rise to the highest level of the sport, a Super Bowl ring in 2007, and 5 concussions that ultimately ended his career. Thanks for joining us today, Ben.
Thanks, Melanie, for having me.
Ben, let's start at the beginning of your journey. So you were born and raised in Minnesota, and you distinguish yourself as an exceptional football player, and you continue to excel at the University of Minnesota, where in 2003 you were named team captain of the football team. Along the way, you faced several injuries, both in high school and college. Tell us about those.
Oh, it's one of those kind of bittersweet parts of every athlete's career is injury, and unfortunately for me, I had a pretty significant injury-filled career from traumatic brain injury to different orthopedic injuries. And so with each of those comes an opportunity to make a decision for how you're going to come out of that, and how you're going to persevere and endure through those valleys. And thankfully, those injuries ultimately are what led to being on the Indianapolis Colts, which was a team that was blessed to win a Super Bowl. And so while you never want to go through injuries and while you never want to experience concussions specifically, without those injuries, I wouldn't have ended up on that team and wouldn't have been in a very special position.
Right. Yeah. In 2004, you were signed by the Indianapolis Colts as an undrafted free agent. Despite ongoing injuries, you achieved the ultimate goal, as we said, the Super Bowl. And you mentioned in your book that you had to ask your wife for details about the Super Bowl party the next day in Indianapolis. Can you share more about that experience?
Well, coming to Indianapolis was a miracle in and of itself, because I was up for the nation's top tight end award, and I was a preseason All-American player, and I had a debilitating abdominal tear at the end of my senior year, which took me out of the draft. So I went from being a potential first round draft pick to not getting drafted at all. And it was through the miracle relationship with Tony Dungy that I landed in Indianapolis and was able to rebuild my career, which ultimately and unfortunately ended because of concussions. And one of the consequences that really affected me was my executive functioning and some of the short and long term memory applications. And so there are a number of stories where I have really struggled to remember details of some of the most significant times of my life that really should be concretely in place. But that was one of the examples that you just described, is as people are talking about their memories of those details, just sitting there listening and wondering, why don't I have the same capacity? And having to lean into my wife to help me remember through her own eyes and through her own experiences. A number of those events, Melanie, were, I think, really what opened my eyes and were light bulb moments into realizing how significant traumatic brain injury can be and the impact that it can have on people.
Mm-hmm. On your Super Bowl ring, the word faith is engraved in the ring. And Colts owner Jim Irsay at the Super Bowl ring ceremony stated, "Faith gives you the strength to have the perseverance to move forward, even after many disappointments." Truly, Ben Utecht has endured many disappointments, but you have persevered. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we have the only Super Bowl ring in the history of football to have spiritual symbolism engraved in the side of the ring. And that's
Wow.
a testament to Tony Dungy and really the family environment that he wanted to create inside an NFL locker room. And in my main job in my life, which is to help organizations develop championship culture and leadership capabilities, I speak a lot to the acronym that I really experienced out of that faith symbolism, which is freedom for all individuals to trust and hope in each other. And so when you can create a culture that allows a very diverse group of individuals to trust and hope in each other, there's really nothing you can't overcome and get through together. And that's why that symbolism is so valuable.
Absolutely. You were traded to the Cincinnati Bengals in 2008. Prior to that, you sustained 5 documented concussions throughout high school, college, and in the pros. Tell us about the concussion you sustained during a game with the Indianapolis Colts versus the Denver Broncos. You remember it vividly, I'm sure. Week 4, 2007.
Yeah, that was a more serious concussion because it was the first time I had been diagnosed with amnesia. And I actually don't remember anything about the play other than what I was able to watch on game film the next day. And it's a weird experience trying to explain to someone what it feels like to have a total time period of your life completely removed, which obviously comes with that diagnosis of amnesia. And that was the concussion where I really started to notice some differences in my cognitive abilities. And as we discussed, earlier before we started, becoming a post-it note person, right? Because it was like all of that information that I used to be able to retain in the first 4 to 5 minutes of having conversations with people just began to disappear and become more of a struggle. And so um, that play in particular, I had ended up on the ground, and I was accidentally kicked in the back of the helmet by a defender jumping over me. And on film, it really didn't look like much of a hit, but you could see my head bob down in my helmet, and then my body went unconscious. And then I woke up and was talking to teammates and high-fiving teammates, and I ran off the field and I was talking with coaches before they made me sit down. And all of that is just completely gone. I don't really remember the rest of that day at all. And it came from really just a minor hit to the back of the head. But that amnesia diagnosis, I think, really set in on helping me understand, okay, this is a different type of an injury than an orthopedic injury, because it's having an impact on, what makes me who I am, which is my neurological functioning as a human.
Right. So you were traded to the Cincinnati Bengals in 2008, and you're with this team for 1 season. You stated in your book that during the season, you realized that you were having trouble learning the Bengals playbook. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, kind of speaking to some of the executive function issues that I was starting to notice, it was just more difficult to learn new things. And so when you go to a new team and have to learn a completely new offense with a lot of new language, that was more of a struggle than it had ever been for me. And ultimately, obviously, that second year that I was playing in Cincinnati, and having that final concussion, all of that really led to a difficult decision that we had to make, for
Yeah.
my future and my family.
Right, right. So let's go there. In August 2009, the HBO series Hard Knocks was featuring the Cincinnati Bengals. It was the first week of training camp with the Bengals. You were knocked unconscious and sustained yet another concussion. I remember watching this, Ben. Um,
Mm.
and Hard Knocks captured a heartbreaking moment when your teammates gathered around you on the field, taking a knee in concern as you lay there. And I remember Chad Ochocinco Johnson was visibly shaken and clearly offering a prayer up to the man upstairs. You were transported by ambulance to the hospital. Ben, in your book, you described the moment after arriving at the hospital. Doctors cut off my uniform and pads. Little did I realize that I would never wear a uniform in competition again.
Mhm.
Ben, take us back to this pivotal and life-changing moment.
Yeah, it's I've only watched that segment once before, and I don't know if I'll watch it again, actually.
Right.
But
Oh,
it's hard to see your teammates in that position, and every team is such a tight-knit fraternity. of brotherhood. And so when one of your teammates goes down, you're always, your immediate reaction is to stop and is to care. And in many respects, it is to pray. And so that was meaningful. And obviously, what a challenging thing to have to, come to the end of a promising career due to injury. But that's the story of so many athletes, Melanie, as
Right.
you've done this work. I mean, that's you described it perfectly, that the NFL stands for not for long. I mean, I think the average career span of an NFL player today is only 2.5 years, 2.5 to 3 years. Um,
2.5 to 3 years. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Not for long. Wow.
yeah, and that's, because there's a lot of talent that comes in every year and because of injuries. And so, yeah, that was a difficult time. But, again, how do you handle the valleys, and how do you pick yourself up? And I thank God that I had an identity that was grounded in my faith and in my family, so that, even though it wasn't what I wanted to have happen, it, I knew it was going to lead towards something else, and that's where that faith comes in, that trust and that hope. That's
Absolutely.
bigger than yourself. So.
Bigger than yourself. Right. So the Bengals cut you November 2009. You mentioned in your book, amazing, amazing quote here. There's something about this game that just gets a hold of you and does not let you go. It's violent and dangerous and takes an unbelievable toll on your body, but it's a beautiful game that I love. Even with all it costs me, I still love it.
Yeah. Well, listen, sports is such a significant platform for human development. And it's such an amazing opportunity for so many that come out of very difficult life circumstances. And so you can't take those positive themes for granted. And that's, I think, been some of the tension in the concussion debate, which is a good debate to have. And the questions that come from both the performance side and the protection side, they are conversations that both are equally important. And so I always tried to find the middle ground
Mhm.
in that, and really try to celebrate the brain and celebrate the game at the same time, right? Because when it comes to contact sports or sports in general, you're never going to be able to prevent concussions. Concussions are a byproduct of contact sports. So if that's true, then how do you change the way in which we manage, and do a better job of protecting our athletes through education and through technique? Because you're never going to be able to remove that injury. And so that quote just really represents the fact that most of the career opportunities that I've had in my life have come out of, having been able to play in the NFL and win a Super Bowl with a team. And so I think it would be in poor taste for me to say that the NFL was, evil in any way in its nature, because of. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't get better. It doesn't mean that they
Right. Right.
uh, learn and provide better support systems and services for the players, which they are doing. But I think you got to find that balance, right? Because there's so much good that comes out of sports.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Also, in your book, you mentioned looking back, I wish I would have known more about concussions, and I should have known more about concussions before I was knocked out of the practice field at the beginning of training camp. But clearly, concussion protocols have changed in the NFL and in school sports. We have return to play laws in all 50 states. We've evolved and we've improved. I know this is a really complex topic and we could be here for a couple of weeks, but can you share a few of your thoughts on the advancements made in concussion protocols since 2009?
Yeah, there's been so much, and
Right.
the NFL Players Association has created the Mackey White Player Health and Safety Committee, which brings some of the top medical minds all around the world together to make sure that every year we're really focusing on the improvements that can be made. And so those return to play protocols that are now in place really provide a structure of accountability that removes, it's designed at least to try and remove the bias that exists naturally within sports, which is every player wants to be on the field no matter what, and every coach and every organization wants the player to be on the field because of the impact they make, towards the outcome of a game. And so you always have that tension. So how do we remove the responsibility from the team and its physicians and remove the responsibility from the athlete? And so one of my favorite additions to the return to play protocol is the non-biased neurospecialist that is on the sidelines and in the booth for every NFL game. And they're the ones monitoring the field outside of the team physicians and outside of the players to determine, who potentially has a concussion and needs to go through those protocols. So they step in and they make the decision. And there's really nothing that the team, coaches or physicians, owners, or the players can do about it. And so I thought that was a really good advancement. And I was happy to see that the NFL supported that.
Absolutely. Yes. We always talk about let that brain heal after concussion and play sports safely. Absolutely. So we know that we have the 4 R's, right? Recognize, remove, refer, and return. There's also talk that we have another R, reconsider. At the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training, we are committed to advancing the implementation of return to learn laws. While all 50 states have return to play laws, only 13 states currently have return to learn laws. Our goal is to ensure that a temporary injury does not derail a student's academic trajectory. As we know, education remains a vital component of a given player's future. As the saying goes in the NFL, not for long. What would you say to a high school freshman who intends to play a sport, such as football, in addition to their studies?
So what I've advocated for is the importance for student athletes, especially pre-adult student athletes, to make sure that they and their parents form a relationship with a neurologist. And the neurologist is the brain expert. They are the experts of diagnosing injury and disease within the brain. And so outside of your athletic trainers, which are very, very important and essential, or outside of your general physicians, which also are very important and essential in your health, I think it's critical that you build a relationship with the brain expert, with a neurologist, so that in case you ever have to face a concussion, you can go to the specialist of the brain and you can make sure that you become a part of their medical spectrum so that they can be the ones guiding you. And within that, I think it fits into your new R, right? So within that is going to be obviously a platform of education and learning from the top specialists in the field of brain health. But then also through that education will be opportunities for reconsideration. And so that to me is very important, right? Is making sure that you have educated yourself and are connected to the brain expert.
Thank you. And after being released by the Bengals in November 2009, you faced significant life changes and difficult decisions. You had married Karen in 2006. Karen was Miss Minnesota in 2005, and you had a daughter. Tell us about chapter 2 in Ben Utecht's life at this point in your life.
Well, that was ultimately what led to retiring because while I probably could have had some chances to continue playing, having just started a family, it became very apparent that that was the most important and wanting to ensure brain health longevity. And so our family grew very quickly from one daughter to 4 daughters. And in that process, I also was able to really experience significant rehabilitation and healing through a brain training franchise that I met in Minneapolis called Learning RX. And Learning RX exists to really be a neuropsychological platform to help identify where your weaknesses are cognitively and then to create custom programs in order to help you train your way back into cognitive health. And so I did 100-hour intensive brain training program. And during that time, Karen would tell you that she got her husband back, and a lot of those issues that I was dealing with, I was able to re-strengthen those neural pathways or maybe even create new neural pathways to get to the same destination, just a different route, which we know is really, it's really a common understanding within neurology because of the neuroplasticity of the brain. And so the brain is miraculous, and it's able to heal and to even find new ways to to create more efficient memory and processing. And so I was a beneficiary of that experience, and so that was an answer to prayer.
Wow. In 2011, you joined Jim Brickman. You've also collaborated with Sandy Patty in terms of music. You also wrote a song. You produced 6 albums, sung for 2 presidents, performed with nationally renowned maestros and symphonies, and even serenaded Muhammad Ali on his birthday. In 2012, you were nominated for a Dove Award. It was a holiday album. And then you wrote a song that was a social media sensation, You Will Always Be My Girls. Can you speak to that beautiful song, please?
Well, that song really came out of the time in my life when I was just transitioning out of the NFL and I was struggling the most with my cognitive weaknesses. And at the time, this is the dawn of chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So this is when CTE, and this is when the movie produced about the life of Dr. Bennett Omalu came out. And so all of the marketing that was going out to players was that if you played football, you're going to have brain disease. And so, thinking about that can be overwhelming because, brain disease really attacks the human soul, and it has a huge impact on your relevance, which is what I talked about in my TED talk. What has relevance if you can't remember it? And so I wrote that song as really a love letter to my family through the lens of fear of what could be, what could be a scary future of forgetting, who they are. And so that was as vulnerable as I could get to share that story. And I think maybe that's why it hit a nerve with people and why it grew so quickly. But it's one of my favorite songs, even though the lyrics are, very sensitive.
Right. You previously became the spokesperson on concussion for the American Academy of Neurology, and you were awarded their Public Leadership in Neurology Award. It just keeps going, Ben. Wow. 2013, you were the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance Ambassador Award winner. And in 2019, your old coach, Tony Dungy, awarded you the Uncommon Leader Award. So just the accolades keep pouring in. Can you speak to that, please?
Oh, well, it's very humbling. I mean, the American Academy of Neurology is the most prestigious neurology group in the world, and they have, I think, somewhere between 30 and 40,000 members who are neurologists and some of the most brilliant minds on the planet when it comes to our brain health. So to be included into that group of leaders was very special, and that Public Leadership in Neurology Award was very prestigious, and so to be in that group was was an honor. And so I've really enjoyed being able to be a spokesperson on the importance of both sides, right? Pro game and pro brain. And that's something that they stand behind as well.
Love that quote. In your book, you mentioned TBIs can happen to anyone, not just football players. I never thought that I'd be in the position, which is the exact same thing that every person with a brain injury thinks. And you could have assumed the victim mindset, poor me, but you didn't. Talk to that.
Well, again, that comes back to my foundation of faith and understanding that my identity is much greater than just an athlete. And so, when I retired at 29 years old, I've got 2/3 of my life left to live. And, I can choose to live in despair and fear, or I can choose to stand up and make decisions for my life in order to improve my health and my platform. And that's the route that I chose to take. And I'm so thankful for that, because it's ultimately, the attitude I needed to have in order to regain my overall functioning.
Right. And obviously, the concussions you suffered on the field ended your career in the NFL, but it doesn't mean that you needed to concede to them, right? You get up every morning, you're determined and setting that example for your little girls. You have a set of twins. So, and they're not little anymore, by the way, are they?
Family is growing. 15 identical twins are 13 and 9. So we are a very active family.
Great. Also in your book, you stated, I believe that the fact that I now find myself in this place of opportunities to shine a light on the problem, and we appreciate you, Ben. So tell us about future goals for Ben Utecht now.
Well, I'm an entrepreneur and a business leader. I'm a chief culture officer in a private equity group here in Minneapolis. And so I'm trying to take everything I learned about being on a championship team and having a coach that won a world championship built on the power of servant leadership. Everything that I'm trying to do is really about pouring back into people and helping them reach their potential. I think my goals are to just continue to increase that impact and that influence in those areas, and especially with the brain, wherever I can be a support system to say yes and continue to do whatever we can through the American Academy of Neurology and the American Brain Foundation to find cures for brain disease, because that will absolutely change the world.
Yes, it will. Thank you, Ben, for sharing your story with such honesty and capturing both the disappointments and the highs and the lows. We're deeply appreciative of the hope that you've offered to our listeners. Here at the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training, it's been an honor to meet you, and we wish you and your family all the best in the next chapters of your life. I sincerely hope our paths cross again.